Welcome to this week's edition of the Belau Report. I'm Jane Belau. Our guest this week is Shaun from the City Council of Rochester, and we welcome you back.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I always enjoy being here.
And look at what you brought. All right, let's start with the election today, because we'll know by tomorrow if it passed, if both of them passed. It's only two things on the ballot, right?
That is correct. Yes. So from the city perspective, I've been promoting the sales tax extension. We've had a sales tax since about 1982. Originally it was for the flood control, and then we've extended it. If you go to our website, City of Rochester website, and look at all the different projects this community's done with it, it's huge. And so now it's up again. In the state legislative people a year ago didn't finish their tax bill, and we were ready to do it last year. And since it didn't get done, we didn't have authorization from the state. We then, this year at May 23rd, found out that we could have it on a ballot. So we put it on the ballot today. The 7th is being voted on. I've been out with 26 different presentations out in the community telling people why this is a good thing, answering questions. 4 basic things on it. One of them is for roads. We're going to help repair some of our roads. Second one is flood control. And flood control is important because, you know, we have to maintain what we have and how to protect Rochester. If you remember back in '78 when we had the flood, that was devastating to our community. The third thing is economic vitality, and basically that is some employment things, but also housing. And last night at our city council meeting, we talked about how to incentivize home ownership in the entry level around that 270 mark. And then the fourth one is a sports facility. We don't know where that's going to be because we don't have the money to buy it yet, but it's been an interesting adventure on that. We've had people out in the community asking them what our needs are. You know, what do we need in this community? And I think it's 12 outdoor soccer fields, baseball fields, all artificial turf, and then indoors we're going to have basketball courts, and then if we don't using basketball, we'll do pickleball on top of that. We also are going to have 12 pickleball courts on the outside.
Wow.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Yes.
The schools have requests for $10 million
$10 million. I'm not as familiar with that one, but we met with the school superintendent. $10 million, $3 million of that for technology. Right now they need $10 million, and so this would give them $10 million for technology. Then they could take $7 million they have and put it over the general fund. I think they have like 16 different funding sources. And so they take from this bucket to that bucket to this bucket. And you know, as you know, I graduated from Lourdes, but I went to Harriet Bishop, I went to John Adams, and schools changed quite a bit since when I was in school.
Huh, wow. Well, now let's talk about the city's expenditures.
Yep.
And what, have you set your final levy limit?
No, we haven't. Well, we did. I mean, you're right. Back in September, the state requires us to set our limit, and that's 9.4% of a tax levy. Now, that means our budget went up 9.4%. Now, that will get trickled down to the homeowners and the business owners on their portion of it. So basically, if your house value did not go up, you didn't get reevaluated, it's going to be a little bit of a raise. If your value of your house went up a lot, then your taxes will go up.
And what's the biggest element of the cost increase for the city?
Well, a couple things. One of them is inflation's hit us really, really hard. And then back the first year of COVID, we decided as a city council not to raise the property tax, and we're still playing catch up on that. And so, you know, if you think about COVID, you know, I still had the police department, the fire department, and 95% of our services were still taking place. People expected us to provide those services. So when we held that at 0, that just has a trickle effect for us to have to catch up to that. And it's difficult to do that. And, you know, we have 950 employees who want a fair wage, and they want to, you know, with inflation the way that it is, we have 17 bargaining units in this And so one year we have to deal with the police union, the next year we deal with the fire department union, and they have mediation, and we go to mediation with them typically, and then they set the standard for everybody else down the line, which is the system that the city's had for at least 30 years.
Okay. And a fleet of electric buses?
Yes, you're talking about our, hopefully we're going to get funded from the federal government to do our rapid bus link system, and that'll run from the west parking lot out there at Cascade and run into town, and then turn around at the Fullerton lot and come back. A bus service every 5 minutes. You're going to get on it at the station. You're just going to walk right on. If you have a bicycle, you'll wheel that right on. If you're in a wheelchair, you'll wheel it right on. And it will be fare free, which means that it doesn't cost you anything. Mayo Clinic has signed an agreement. I think it's 98% of the cost for the next 20 years. They will pay the operating cost, whatever the state and the federal government does. So we will not have any property tax in that. I'll have, I believe, 7 stations. One of the stations, kind of exciting, is going to go under 2nd Street at St. Mary's, so that you, if you're heading west, you can just walk underneath the road and get on that station. And if you're heading east, you can walk on the road and get to St. Mary's and not have to go outside.
Wow. Now, are they being subsidized by the feds?
Yes, all of our transit is subsidized by the federal government and or the state government. Your property taxes go to, property tax goes to our bus service in Rochester.
Wow.
Yes.
But I hope they work.
You and I have had this discussion, and I'm with you. I'm doubting that the electric buses is a prudent thing to do. I know up in Duluth they did not work well, and I'll be surprised if they do, but we've got 12 buses on order. It takes about 3 years, I think it is, to get them ordered and online. And the neat thing is they're built in Minnesota. And so that's,
yes, I know.
that's nice to keep that money here in Minnesota.
It is Minnesota, and they're collecting the little Lime scooters.
Yep, they just announced that the Lime scooter for the summertime and wintertime here is done, and they're picking them up, and they'll come back to us probably in April or May. And that's an interesting transportation need. It's that last mile, they call it. You take the bus to work, and you need to go to St. Mary's from downtown campus. You can hop on your Lime scooter. It's not for everybody. It's an age thing, but there's a lot of people who use them. It's a great facility. We happen to have an agreement with them. They could have come into Rochester without an agreement. They could have just said, we're doing a business, and good luck with that. And but they've been a pretty good partner for us.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the Mayo plan for 5 years was something that the council's already looked at?
They have a little special zoning district, and so Mayo Clinic does, and so every 5 years they come with their plan, and they say this is what we think we're going to do. That's part of their zoning in the medical district. I've seen it, I think 25 years ago was the first one I saw, and every 5 years I've sit in the city council meeting in the audience and see what they're presenting and stuff, and they try to give you their plan. They're talking about a $4.4 billion plan. They're going to be closing 3rd and 4th Avenue. They're going to completely redo the entrance to Gonda. I was there today with my son, and that entryway is crowded. The cars were backed up, and they're going to have a new plan to do that. And it's just, when you walk in the Mail building, and it's just such a caring place, and people do such a good job. And I was born and raised in Rochester, born at St. Mary's, and I think we take that for granted.
I think so too. We take a lot of what Mayo does for granted.
They are our biggest property taxpayer in the county and in the city.
Isn't that amazing?
And people don't realize that. They're the largest private employer in the state of Minnesota. They have employees who come from 81 of our 87 counties.
Okay. As someone who goes around the city, I hear real complaints about the bike lanes downtown. What in the world are we doing to the
Well-
traffic?
Well, about 9 months ago, I'm on ROCOG, which is this federal government requires this county and the city and small towns and the townships to work together. And so they had a report to us from the census, from the 2020 census. And I don't have my numbers in front of me, but people who were single car occupancy went down by about 8-9%. People, which is a good thing, and people walking to work, now this is walking to work, went up from 3 to 5%. Bike lanes usage went down. And it's 1% of people use, less than 1% of people use their bike to get to work. And that's the census numbers. And so I had proposed that we not have bike lanes on Center Street and allow these businesses to have their parking again. And I lost that battle 4-3. You know, facts didn't matter to some people. They're more of an emotional issue. The other thing that's interesting, if you do your research on the bike lanes, they first started out and they said, well, just want to paint on the just a bike symbol. Well, that doesn't work. Well, then we want to have a marked lane, a dedicated lane. Well, they found out that that doesn't work. And then they said, well, we want to have balusters put up so people, you know that that's a bike lane. That's not safe. So the only real safe bike transportation, now this is from the federal government, is a raised bike lane that is separated from the roads. And most bike accidents are bikes onto bikes or people falling off their bikes. Very few accidents are cars that run into people on a bike. Now bikes run into cars. And so that was an interesting study for me to read. And you know, I try to look at factual studies, not somebody's opinion. And you know, there'll be some people from We Bike, which is the lobbyist group here in Rochester for bikes. They will say, wow, no, there's more people who ride their bike, and their numbers aren't truthful.
Wow.
No.
Well, now they're making some other downtown lanes 2 lanes, right? Right
now, I think everything's on hold for downtown until we find out what actually is going to happen with Mayo Clinic, and you know, do we have to close 3rd and 4th Avenue, and how are we going to do that transportation? Last night at our city council meeting, we voted to have 2-hour free parking for our downtown businesses. It was always been an hour. Some complaints that, you know, I can't get into a restaurant or I can't buy some clothes at Hanny's or downtown to some great shops. And so we extended that in, that's a $40,000 for 2 months. It would cost us $40,000 of lost revenue. But the city council thought it was well worth doing it. I think that passed 5-1.
Oh.
So we're excited. We have a great downtown. I'm downtown, I've been almost 5 days a week.
All right. I know the traffic downtown is terrific, and finding a parking place is a challenge with the bike lanes, and lots of people complain about it.
Well, it's interesting because I read the Post-Bulletin and they have a history section on it. And they'll go 50 years ago or 75 years ago, and in the 1950s, the #1 complaint about downtown, there was no parking. It's always been a problem with downtown, the perception that there isn't parking. I've not had that problem, but you know, if you park in a ramp, the first hour is free. Now the first 2 hours are free. In my truck, I carry a bunch of quarters for the meter, and about once a month I get that $28 parking ticket that is frustrating, but you know, sometimes I learn, sometimes I don't.
And the Post-Bulletin did something on the billboards by a church?
Nope, that was Reagan billboards. They have 108 billboards in Rochester, and back in the in the 70s and 80s, there's a lot of rules that got put in place for billboards. And so what happened was that they applied for a variance on 52, Highway 52 by the old skate country. It's a Volkswagen dealership is there now. And they were going to be too close to a church. And when we voted the first time, we voted to give them that variance. And then the mayor vetoed that. That's her 7th veto of her career. we've overread her 6 times. This one we did not. We had one city council member change their vote because they said, well, I have a friend that doesn't pay attention, billboards interrupt her, and then the other friend, or the other city council member said she abstained from it because she didn't really understand the issue. So that didn't get overturned, but we tried. So we ended up getting sued. So we're in a lawsuit with the billboard company, and there's some other rules on billboards. It's difficult for billboard companies and landowners. If I own a piece of land and I want some rent from a billboard, I have the opinion that you should be able to rent that and have some rules and regulations. So we have not had new billboards permitted in a long time in Rochester.
Okay. Now, the biggest cost or the biggest issue that's facing the city right now?
I would have to say it's housing. It's that entry level homeowner occupied home, and we worked hard on that. We started back in February 6th. The city council voted 7-0 to instruct our staff to come back with some incentives. Last night they had a phenomenally good report. It's a 26-page report on options that we have, and they came back with 4 different options. And number 1 is when the sales tax extension passes, and it will pass today, I'm confident, we'll be able to take some of that money and apply it to incentivize builders to get back into that market. Right now, we don't have anybody in that 260, 270 entry-level home. I went down with the county commissioners, a couple of them, and looked at Wabasha. Bigelow Homes is building the homes down there for $253,000, slab on grade, double attached garage, brand new house. The energy savings, if you lived in a house in Elton Hills or Sunset Terrace and you moved into one of these houses, you'd save about $100 a year or $100 a month in your utility bill. That's real money. So we might go back to doing TIF funding too for our houses. We did that in the 90s. I don't know if you remember, but in the 90s we also had that crisis in that entry-level homes, and we worked our way out of that. First Homes was established with the Rochester Area Foundation. They did a phenomenally good job with that program, and so that's still here in Rochester, but that I think we'll use also. There's some other funding sources, but I'm really encouraged because Rochester has a housing coalition, and part of that coalition is the Rochester Area Foundation, the City of Rochester, Olmsted County and Mayo Clinic, and DMC. And so we all meet, we all discuss how we can attack these problems. We've done a really good job on apartment buildings. We're at where we need to be, but single family homes, we are down, about 1/3 of where we should be. We'll have less than 200 houses built this year. We need to be building about 500 houses a year. And so that'll help that supply, get people into homes. The other thing which is curious on the coalition is the BIPOC community, the minority community, is about 22% home ownership, and the European American is about 77%. So there's a big gap there, and so you look at why that is, and my grandfather had a house, and his dad had a house, and my dad had a house. I've owned 8 or 9 houses. I know what to do in a house. But if you come from a different culture, or you haven't had that experience, you don't know how to operate a house. You don't know that you got a shovel. You don't know you got to change the furnace filter. The fear of that unknown. And so there's programs out there from the state that help people learn how to own a house. And so there's other resources for down payment assistance that you can get. There's other resources for if you have bad credit, that the state has programs that they'll have a nonprofit help you with your credit to get you out of that mess so that you can own a home and build wealth. That's one of the biggest, for Americans, one of the biggest wealth gainers is your home.
And last night you made 2 decisions on housing, and why don't you tell our viewers about those?
Well, we just finished with the first one, and that was the incentives for single-family homes. The second one is we've been struggling with the homeless in Rochester, and how do we handle that? And back in 2014, the City Council had a resolution and said, hey, you cannot use our facilities, you can't use our property for tents or overnight staying. Well, homelessness has changed since then, and now the police chief came to us back in, April, and then came back to us in June and asked us to do a no camping on a city property. And then last night we had a few people who showed up and said this isn't fair, but we passed 4-2 an ordinance that says you cannot camp in the city parks or on city land. I think that'll be a tool that our toolbox will use. You know, some people are saying that we're trying to criminalize homelessness. We're not. But things have changed, and you get people who say, you know, you can't sleep in the park, and they look at our policemen and go, so what are you going to do about it? And there really wasn't much we could do about it. And so now we'll be able to say, well, I can write you a misdemeanor ticket, and you'll have to go to court and move on. We've had people who are not wanting to be housed, and we have housing for them. And one of the women that we had out in the community finally is in a housing. And she's had housing offered to her for over a year, and she just refused it. Christmas Eve last year, it was 20 below zero, 10 below zero. We had 3 people staying in a tent, which is not safe. We've had 3 people die in tents in Rochester, in parks. That's not humane. That's not compassion. And so how do we do that? It was interesting last night, the old sheriff, I shouldn't call him old, but Steve Borkert was there, and he had said, you know, we changed our outlook on how we handle DWIs. We changed our outlook on how we handled domestic abuse. We changed our philosophy on how we did check child abuse cases. On homelessness, we need to change our way that we're doing it because it's not working. And he had a very strong statement to make, and so easy decision, probably not, but one that we needed to do last night was with homelessness.
Wow. So the Planning and Zoning Commission meets tonight. This is the day after the election, the 8th of November.
Yep.
And so they will make the ultimate decision, or?
Nope, they never make the ultimate decision. We make the ultimate decision. That is our job to do that. They advise to the city council. And so back about 2 months ago, well, a little longer than that, our planning and zoning staff thought we should do RX2 throughout the Pill Hill area. And that went to planning and zoning. The planning and zoning said, no, we don't agree with that. We don't want Pill Hill. It's a historic area. It has a character to it. We want to remain with that character. And so the city council voted to send that back to staff and come back with a recommendation on what area do we really want to have RX2. And so tomorrow night, Wednesday night, the meeting, they'll have planning and zoning relook at that, which it should get passed. And I think the city council will then agree with that. I'm just one vote, but I think that we'll say, yes, we don't want Pill Hill to be in that R2X area. And it didn't make any sense to me. I like that area. It's historic. It's got character to it. And if you start popping in new houses in there, I think that would destroy it. And I'm glad that it's going back that way.
The YMCA building has been purchased, and the builder's going to build a high-class rental.
Yes.
Now that doesn't help the unserved part of our population.
Well, you know, our housing people will tell you that any apartment, any house is helpful. So if we can get the supply to be bigger. I agree with you that luxury apartment is probably not going to be something that everybody wants to have. I've been a Y guy my whole life. Chuck Azamas knew me when I was this tall. I worked at the Y. It's heartbreaking to see the YMCA of the North close it. And they closed it, and they will sell their property in the parking lot across for about $9 million. They'll take that $9 million. They had $3 million worth of debt that they inherited from the Y, and they'll take it and leave it at the cities, and they will not be servicing Rochester. They say they have some programming, but they will not be building the building downtown. It's heartbreaking. I spent at least 2 months trying to save that pools because we need more aquatic center, and that would have been easy for us to have just the pools and not the rest of the building. And they declined to do that for us. The YMCA of the North is closed. I think it's 5 Ys in the Twin Cities area. They're struggling right now.
Okay, when we talk about revenue for the city and taxes on homes and other properties, we think of costs of maintaining our city.
Correct.
What are we doing with funding?
Well, I mean, this is, I believe it's December 4th, we'll have our public hearing on it, and we'll make our vote that day. I believe that it'll pass 6-1 on our vote, and hopefully we'll get everybody to vote for the 9.3% property tax increase. That's a tax levy increase, that's not your property tax increase. But, you know, I have a property tax breakdown here. Your average home in Rochester is $315,000. So that's your average home. In that average home, the police department gets $336 to provide you 24/7. Our fire department gets $256. Our library gets $125. You know, we have an airport. If you go out to Minneapolis and St. Paul, they don't have an airport. The MAC takes care of that. They don't have sewers and water. That's all handled by the Met Council. They do all their planning for them. They have their own bus system, they have their own library, they have their own parks. It's separate from the city council. So when you're a city council person from Rochester, you encompass all these things that you get to do. You know, I have an airport, and so when anything in our budget, anything in our packet comes with the federal government, it's about 900 pages that week, because the federal government requires all this paperwork. But, you know, for Rochester, I take to heart what it costs to pay your taxes. You know, if you have to pay a $6,000 property tax bill, you basically have to make $9,000 to pay for that. You know, that money comes from people working. And for me, I take that to heart, and I think that we need to spend our money wisely. But we do have an operation that runs 24/7. Our tax cost, if you compare us to comparable cities, is lower than most. Our LGA, which is a bugaboo for me, Duluth gets almost $46 million in LGA, which is the state helps them with their taxes. We will get this year $4 million. The increase that Duluth is getting is higher than what we get. Their increase is higher than what we totally get. And so that's a bugaboo for me when you're a regional center and you're providing all these services. You look at the fire department. If I'm a city council member in Bloomington, if I have a high-rise fire, I can have Edina, I can have Minneapolis, I can have St. Paul come help me. I don't have that here. I can't call Winona and Austin and say, come help me with a high-rise. We do, you know, we have mutual aid, but we have a well-trained fire department. Our police department is the best police department in the area, in the region. You know, I always talk about us having body cameras. Our police department has body cameras. If they have a supervisor who wants to see what's going on, they can key into that body camera. If the officer needs help, if you want to look at it and say, you know, boy, we need to look at that, they have that on the cars. We invest, and I call it an investment in our police department, our fire department. We want to have the very best. Our parks, you know, we're getting better with our parks. We've upped our funding on parks a little bit. We have a park referendum. That average home in that park referendum raised $2 million a year. Costs $30 a home for an average home.
Wow. Okay, we're almost out of 30 minutes. So tell us what we haven't talked about.
Well, we started November 1st, our alternate side parking, having people not leave their car there. That gives us a little bit better job of maintaining and gives us a better job of keeping the traffic flowing through that. It saves us about $160,000 a year for revenue, for costs, for snow plowing. So it does have a cost benefit. I know some people are irritated by it, especially like in the smaller neighborhoods that have single car garage or single car drives. But it's worked out well. You know, we tweaked it, we lessened it by 2 months, but that's a program that just started. I think people need to know that. I think our sales tax extension is going to be a huge help for us. Yeah. That's about 10% of our budget. I think that'll be a big thing for us. You know, we have bonding issues coming up with the state of Minnesota. It's a bonding year for them. And so we've asked a few things for our bonding people. And one of them is money for the airport to do solar panels over the parking lot and have electric car chargers up there. About 1% of cars in Minnesota are electric, which seems odd to me, but about 1%. So, but we've asked for bonding for that. We've also asked for bonding down behind the old Time Theater, the old Red Owl down there, Legends. There's a master plan down there to make that into more of a park-like facility for us, and then tear that parking ramp down and replace that parking ramp. That's our oldest parking ramp we have. It's time for that to go. And some downtown development. The city owns some property that we're trying to get people incentivized to do some more housing downtown.
We had John Wade, who's president of Rochester Area Economic Development, and he was so enthused about the city of Rochester, its growth, and the new businesses that are starting here, that he said all the parents and grandparents should pay attention because there are going to be jobs for their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Yep.
You think that's the way we're going?
I do, and I think John does a great job for us at Ready, and John's a Rochester boy who's been here for a long period of time, and I have a lot of respect for Mr. Wade, and I see us, that incentive coming up. I think our brothers and sisters, our daughters and sons will have jobs, and good paying jobs in Rochester, and I think Rochester's poised to really do even better. You know, I always say that, what's the old quote from James J. Hill, great cities don't happen by accident, you know, and I think Rochester's a great city. But I think one of the things that makes us a great city is that we're always trying to improve. You know, we're not sitting on our laurels and saying we're good enough. We want to try different things. We want to invite different cultures into Rochester. We want to have people be welcome when they come to Rochester. I think that that's important for people to remember that.
All right, now I know why you work so hard, why you need money to work with, and we just want you well paid and happy, and you are, right?
I enjoy service. You know, I enjoy serving the community of Rochester. You know, we work for all of Rochester. We're elected by wards, but you have to think what's good for Rochester. And that is my number one question in my head is what's best for Rochester.
Okay, all right. Anything else that we've forgotten?
I think we did pretty good today.
We'll talk again, I know, before the end of the year.
Fantastic.
So
Thank you.
We'll catch up on what you get into in the next few weeks.
It's always fun.
But anyway, Shaun, it's nice to have you here.
I appreciate your time and this honor. Thank you.
Thank you for your observations and your comments and your description of what's facing Rochester. And hopefully people will remember that at the ballot box.
Thank you.
And we'll be with you next week, same time, same channel. Have a good week and have a good night.